The session today is on lifestyle and cancer, who cares? Now, I chose this title because the evidence relating lifestyle to cancer recurrence is really now quite high. We've known about tobacco for a long time. And when we look at other lifestyle factors like obesity, physical activity, diet and alcohol, there's really burgeoning evidence that these factors are hugely important. And it's wonderful the amount of data that's coming out to support that. And just occasionally I sit back and reflect about how much it has cost to get that evidence. How much has all our cohort studies from Europe, from the US, from China, how much money has been invested? And is it cost effective for any government to invest in research that brings us evidence that is not then translated and implemented? And that's really the question that I have. So I'm going to start by reviewing the evidence on lifestyle. I mentioned tobacco. So tobacco accounts for about 19% of all cancers. And when we look at the other lifestyle topics, the World Cancer Research Fund review on these topics and their continuous update project, which is the most comprehensive review of lifestyle and cancer, suggests that about 20 to 25% of all cancers are related to these lifestyles. That's besides tobacco. So whilst we're all very knowledgeable about tobacco, why is it that other lifestyles get left behind and people don't want to talk about them? And are we as a society doing the right thing by ignoring those? So I want to present the evidence on that, which is now really very strong. And then I want to ask, well, what can we do about it and whose responsibility is it to move this evidence into practice and into policy? And I don't think it's any one sector that has the responsibility. I think it's all sectors, all stakeholders. So I think you and I have an important role in terms of individuals and how we choose to live our lives. But we are at the mercy of those around us, and that includes what our health service offers. It includes what our work sites offer in terms of health and well-being, food, activity, opportunities, smoking policies. We will be hugely influenced by the media. You read one thing in the newspaper today, something else tomorrow. Schools and education have a role. Government has a role, but government isn't going to enact policies that will put them out of government. So we have to work collectively to make the sort of changes that we want to see happen in society around lifestyle. And that might sound ambitious, but if we think of the model of tobacco, there's a very good case here where 30, 40 years ago, all we had in terms of tobacco control was education. So we had posters, we had television adverts, you could pick up leaflets about smoking, how bad it was for you. And I don't think for 1 minute that education changes behaviour. But what it does do is raise awareness of the links between the behaviour and cancer. It's something that everybody now knows. So if you ask people, what disease is tobacco linked to? They will say cancer. But we need to move beyond that, and what tobacco control has moved to is what we might say changing normative behaviours. So a good example I can give of this is 30 years ago as a child growing up at Christmas time, gifts for the uncles who smoked, we always bought them big boxes of cigarettes. Nobody these days would ever dream of doing that. But we don't hesitate from buying our overweight aunts boxes of chocolates or our overweight uncles bottles of wine or whiskey. So in tobacco we've shifted to that sense of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. People still smoke, tobacco's still available. It's not about banning chocolates or anything else, but it's about making that culture shift. So within tobacco control, we saw lots of little changes where tobacco basically became unacceptable, And people understand that. For some people that's uncomfortable, people who smoke, and many people of course have stopped smoking, and we see our smoking rates coming down. And then the next level of action, literally another 10 years on, are the sort of moves that government are doing. So they've got bans on where you can smoke in public places, limits on advertising, marketing, sponsorship, availability, and so on. But government was never going to do that unless there was a real move from the population that wanted that shift. And I think that's what we need to be doing with respect to our lifestyle package. And it is lifestyle, it isn't just diet, it isn't just obesity, it isn't just physical activity. And because the way we live our lives, that's part of our everyday lives, so we need to think of the whole thing. Now, for people who specialise in public health, they are very clear that the way to do that is through public policy. So we need to get good environments. We need to make sure there's cycle tracks. We need to make sure there's walking pathways. There's perhaps free access to gyms, and that there's less calorie-dense food marketed and available, and policies that will impact on the whole population. And these are fabulous, absolutely fabulous. But you know, I would predict it's going to take another 20, 30, 40 decades for that sort of level of action. And while we wait for that, and while we support that wholeheartedly, we see individuals, like many of us here, who are at risk of cancer, unable to change our behaviour. So we need to act now, and we need to look at ways beyond education that can help people to support the sort of changes that we want to make.